on this episode of Jeff Does Vegas.
The biggest concern I have is actually the track. If the race is not good, the pomp and circumstance will wear off. Because if the race and the track and everything is basically a yawner, it just is going to lose its steam.
Las Vegas. It's more than just a city. It's a feeling. It's that feeling of excitement when you spot the lights of the strip out the airplane window. It's that feeling of awe as you stroll down the boulevard, taking in the sights and sounds. And it's that feeling of satisfaction, knowing that you're in the greatest city in the world. Over 42 million people from around the world share that feeling every year. And I'm one of them. Taking you to the world-famous Vegas Strip and beyond, my name is Jeff, and this is Jeff Does Vegas. We are roughly a month away from Formula One hitting the Strip in Las Vegas, and to say that it's a controversial topic would be a massive understatement. You've got the proponents saying the event is going to shine the world's spotlight on Vegas, put global attention on the city, and have huge economic benefits, as it's estimated that F1 will bring in over $1 billion in revenue to Las Vegas, or about double what the Super Bowl is expected to bring. Then you've got the other side of the argument, the people who absolutely hate this event. They're mad about the construction chaos, the traffic backups, the cost of tickets, and what it's doing to attractions and scenery along the Strip as preparations for the race continue. As we get closer to Lights Out, I thought it might be fun to have Todd McCandless from the Parc Fermé Podcast back on the show for another discussion about the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Todd joined me about a year and a half ago, shortly after the race was officially announced, and we went in depth with our opinions on the event. But now, with things fully in motion and race weekend quickly approaching, I figured it was time for an update. In addition to discussing all the issues surrounding the big Vegas race, Todd shared his thoughts on the current F1 season. We talked about the dominance of Max Verstappen and the effect that was having on viewership, and whether or not the addition of another American-based team can help re-spark U.S. interest in Formula One. Please enjoy my conversation with Todd McCandless of the Parc Fermé Podcast.
Yeah, I enjoyed our first conversation when it was early days, right, for the Las Vegas Grand Prix announcement. And a lot of time has passed. A lot of heavy equipment's been rolled out onto the Strip, and we're about ready to go. So, yeah, it's great to be back.
So let's start off by talking about the current F1 season, because it's people who are watching the season and watching this year, I'm sure some are enjoying it and some maybe not so much.
Yeah, right. That's true.
Let's get, I want to get your thoughts on the F1 season. What do you think so far this year?
Well, certainly it's been a dominant performance from Red Bull and Max Verstappen, no doubt about that. I'm a bit old school, Jeff. I've been watching Formula One for decades, right? I started when I was 8 or 9 years old, and I've watched for decades. I think it's all about managed expectations of what Formula One actually is, and to new fans that have come on board to the sport via maybe Drive to Survive. So Drive to Survive, a well done series. It was sort of bottled lightning, the perfect storm. You had COVID lockdown, people had home bored, found it on Netflix. It exploded because it's a well done series. Their expectations of Formula One are going to be quite a bit different than my expectations, having watched, the death of Senna back to Niki Lauda to James Hunt, right? So it's going to be markedly different than my experience or my expectations for Formula One. For them, that Drive to Survive is very exciting, and it sort of gives the impression that Formula One is sort of a series that on any given Sunday, anyone could win the race, and they made it super exciting about a battle for 12th position. 12th position gets you jack squat in Formula One, right? No points, no nothing. But I've got deference for making an exciting, series about it. I have no issue with that. But you enter the sport as a casual sports fan coming into Formula One. Your expectation is it's riddled with excitement, and this season has not been. the season has been wholly predictable from the very beginning of just how dominant that Red Bull car was in the early days. Winning by 30, 40 seconds over the field is pretty clearly a dominant car. Now that's closed down over the season, the balance of the season. But for me, for a veteran F1 fan, this is par for the course. And for me, Formula One is not an any given Sunday series. It's not a spec series. It is a set of regulations. Millions and millions of dollars are spent by teams to build bespoke cars and chassis and aerodynamics and engines, and to compete within this set of regulations. Some teams are going to get it right, and some teams are going to get it wrong. And there's always been that argument between the resources, right? So the haves and the have-yachts, right? And so there's always that element that the big teams have more resources. Well, now there's a cost cap, new regulation changes. And what you'll see in Formula One is a slower evolution between team to team. And so if you go back 2000 to 2005, Ferrari dominant, right? Renault comes in with Fernando Alonso, unseats Ferrari, does a better job in 2006, right? Then Red Bull comes, and Red Bull wins 4 years on the trot with Sebastian Vettel. Then Mercedes comes in. They buy Braun GP. They come in. They do a fantastic job. 8 constructors championships in a row, 7 drivers championships for Lewis Hamilton. Nobody was complaining back then, but now everybody's really upset that Max has won his 3rd as compared to 8 constructors championships or 7 drivers championships. Everybody was fine with that, but now that Max and Red Bull are winning, there's major issues and bemoaning. And I think the reason is because back when Mercedes was dominating, the sport didn't have all the new fans to it expecting more. And so I think, but in answer to your query, to make a long story longer, I think the reality of it is you have to appreciate what Red Bull, all of the men and women and Milton Keynes, the hard work and the sacrifice that they've made to create a team and a car that is this dominant and this good, and then put it in the hands of a driver that is just sublime. Max is driving at a level that only champions achieve. And it's nothing short of amazing. And this is coming from a Ferrari fan. I'm a Ferrari fan, a long-suffering Ferrari fan. But, I'm elated for Red Bull and their success, just as I was Mercedes, and I just wish it was Ferrari, and hopefully next year it will be. But you can't discount just how good Red Bull has been and what they've done. And Max has already secured the Drivers' Championship. The team secured the Constructors. And people say, well, there's no point in watching. But as a longtime Formula One fan, that second place in the drivers and constructors all the way down to 10th, each step of that is worth millions and millions of dollars in prize money. And for those teams now, the majority of their income is coming from that FOM prize money. And so it's critical for them to finish 3rd or 4th or, try to improve. Even a little team like Williams, to get up to 6th, 7th in the championship, that's a difference between a better wind tunnel, a better aerodynamicist engineer, a better enclave or fabrication tools, and those kind of things. It's huge for teams like that. So there's still a lot to watch Formula One in the balance of the season, and I've been excited about it. But yes, it has been predictable, and for those that were expecting anyone to unseat Red Bull, it's not happened yet. It could next year, though.
I feel like we really got spoiled in the 2021 season. I mean, that was really, that was kind of the first big season after the Drive to Survive effect, and everybody was watching it, and it all came down to that last race and no, Mikey, no. And that whole thing, it all came down to that. And then everybody got really excited about, wow, like you say, it was, as you say, this any given Sunday attitude where, oh my God, you've got Red Bull, Mercedes neck and neck, and and then into the next season it came, and as you say, all of a sudden there's Max winning by 30 seconds, a minute. Like it really kind of sucked away that excitement the following year for a lot of people.
Yeah, it did, Jeff, and I think you're spot on. I think that's the point. Is that when you look at 2021, it came down to the last race, last corner, right? Not a Formula One seasons are like that. Most aren't, but there have been some like that down to a point, and so those are the exception, not the rule. The rule, I think Red Bull's 4-year domination, Mercedes is an exception, an 8-year domination. That's because the FIA left the regulations pretty set for 8 years. They typically don't do it that long, but they're really making a point of the hybrid engine and all that kind of thing. So they left that for 8 years. Ferrari before that for 4 years, 5 years. So that's pretty typical. There's been times Fernando Alonso just missed out. Lewis Hamilton won the championship by a point over Felipe Massa, who now is trying to sue Formula One over that ordeal. That was by a point. So it does happen. It's just not every single year.
With Max's dominance and with Red Bull's dominance and everything, it seems like from what I've kind of read, it's maybe causing some issues with interest in the sport, particularly in the US. Are you hearing that and sort of seeing that or feeling that at all?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I think when you look at the Formula One fan base, I would say that the high water mark for them was 2022. So off of the 2021 excitement that you alluded to, everybody's on board expecting another barn burner for 2022, and it didn't happen, right? So Formula One's social media engagement and growth sort of peaked in 2022, and in 2023 now it's sort of waned. And there was a report that was just done by, I think, a group called BuzzMe. I don't know them, but they were nice enough on LinkedIn, and they posted the report, and it was really them taking a deep dive into the social engagement of Formula One. They admit that Formula One is still rapidly growing in followers and that kind of thing. And it's one of the fastest growing sports as far as a social media impact or footprint of any other sport. And so that's all good news. But the actual engagement levels have waned quite a bit in 2023. They also did an interesting study on the verbiage, the words being used in association with Formula One. Whereas in 21 and 22, they were like, wow, this is exciting. That was a close race. This is really cool too. This is boring. This is predictable. This is, Max wins everything. So the point is that their social media engagement difference in 1 year went from positive adjectives about the sport to negative. And so I'm sure Formula One's looking at that. They're trying to make hay while the sun shines, but it is having an impact. And the study laid the waning engagement at the foot of Red Bull's dominance. So I think it's a fair thing. What Formula One does to do or will do to potentially stave that off, to stop the bleeding, as it were, to triage that, I'm not sure, because in order to make the series where every car could win on a Sunday and every championship's going to come to the last race, last corner, you'd have to have a full bore specters. They might as well just race go-karts.
Yeah, you'd almost have to turn it into essentially, now I haven't watched NASCAR in a billion years, so I don't know if it's still like this, but you'd almost have to do that whole idea where everybody's racing the same car, everybody's racing the same engines, everybody's doing the same to just make it fair. Because of course, I always say the running joke is if you took Max Verstappen and stuck him in the Haas, where would he place? Would he still come out first, or would he be a back of the pack or a midfield racer?
Yeah, he'd be in the points. Yeah, he's that good. Yeah, he is good.
Is the ebbing interest, particularly in the US, is that bad news for Formula One and Liberty Media, considering they, over the last few years, have been making this big push in the US to try to increase viewership, and of course, adding a couple of US races with Miami now in its second year, Vegas being in its first year? Is this bad news for them?
Jeff, that's a great question. And I think from Formula One, from Liberty Media's standpoint, they are doubling down on Formula One's U.S. footprint. I've argued for years now, long before Liberty Media even knew what Formula One was. I've argued that this notion of you've got to bring F1 to America, that's wrong. That's completely reverse. You have to take America to F1. And that's kind of what Drive to Survive did. It got viewers steeped in the politics, the personalities, the narratives, the stories. Americans love a great story, either good or bad, but we love a story, right? And that's what DTS did. So Liberty comes in, they do DTS, they get this explosive growth. Look, there's a lot of smart people over at Liberty Media, and I'm not taking anything away from them. They'll know that their engagement's down. They'll know that the adjectives are a little more pejorative than they were in 22. They'll want to fix that. Their challenge, Jeff, is that Formula One is the commercial rights holder of F1. The FIA is the regulatory body. And they've got a president that's a bit of a loose cannon, and Stefano Domenicali, the CEO of Formula One Management, and then you've got Mohammed bin Sulayem, who is the president of the FIA. They're marching to two different drums, and you've got the FIA saying, "Yep, bring Andretti in." Formula One is like, "Time out," So the problem for Liberty is, in America, this is a huge market for them. It's the biggest consumer market in the world. And for them, it's imperative that Formula One succeed here, because they doubled down when they bought Formula One, a traditionally British European sport, and said, no, we really want to grow it in America. So they added the Miami Grand Prix to Austin. They've now added Las Vegas, more races in North America, Canada, Mexico. We got Brazil. And so they're trying to really increase that to capitalize on this market. Arguably, you and I could talk about ticket prices in Vegas and saying they're capitalizing a little too much, but
we will. Trust me.
We'll get to that. But Liberty has to take a long look at that. They've got to be careful. They can't, if they do things that are artificial constructs to the sport, i.e. spec series, changing regulations willy-nilly to slow down the fast team. You got to be careful there, because you're going to alienate. Now, they may think that all us old fans are white hairs, but we're not. They've got to be careful. You're going to alienate those fans. And what you're left with is newer fans, many of them who might be just casual sports fans. Some of those new fans have jumped, head first, and they've become total anoraks, and that's great for the sport. But they've got to be careful with the American market, because there's too much competition for our eyeballs over here. Too many sports, too many things to distract us and garner our attention beyond Formula One, which races every fortnight. They're adding more races, I understand, but that's going to be a problem for them if their appeal, their brand, is starting to wane. They're gonna have to do something. That means that DTS isn't keeping it all afloat from a brand perspective. Their marketing and media in America isn't overcoming the white noise of general sports marketing and entertainment media news. So they're going to have to spend some time if they want to retain this market foothold, and if they want to keep their foot on the neck of the American market.
It's interesting that you bring up the idea of competing with other sports, particularly in the U.S. And that's a problem that Las Vegas is having. I mean, Vegas has gone from being the largest U.S. market without a major sports franchise of any sort to being the smallest U.S. market with multiple sports franchises between the Vegas Golden Knights and the Vegas Raiders. And you've got WNBA, and you've got professional soccer, and you've got Major League Baseball coming, and you've got all of these things coming in. And then you throw in the Super Bowl, and you throw in Formula One, right. And all of the sudden it's almost like an oversaturation of events to compete with. And I mean, arguably Formula One on a global scale is bigger than all of those other sports that I've mentioned.
Yeah.
But on a US scale, it's a fraction.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, that's exactly right. In order to get Formula One to that level, I don't want to sound nihilistic about it, because there are really smart people at Liberty Media, but I think it's going to be really, really tough, maybe possibly impossible to get Formula One at the level of NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, to get to that level of viewership in the American market. I think it's just going to be really tough. You might say, well, it's kind of newer and we're not used to it. We've been watching baseball our whole lives. Well, wait a minute. Formula One's been in America since cars been racing. It's been here. You just didn't know it. The Indy 500 was a part of the Formula One, world championship in the 50s, right? You just didn't know it. In the 60s, what I would call the halcyon days for Formula One, it's my favorite era, the late 60s, early 70s. America was in love. These are basically the boomers, but they were in love with the European sports car. They used to go, it was kind of Woodstock, drive upstate New York, camp out, bring tents, make an event. Watkins Glen Formula One race was huge during those years. Formula One's been here a long time. It's just Americans didn't maybe know that. So it's not that we haven't been in America long enough. It's just that we haven't done what Liberty Media is trying to do, which is to really accelerate F1's brand in the American market. And it's a hard sell. It's hard.
Do you think bringing in Mario Andretti and Cadillac and American names. I mean, Haas is an American-based team, but I don't think they get recognized necessarily as an American-based team. I know I really had to think about it for a second, being Haas is American. But do you think bringing in that level of recognition with Andretti and with Cadillac, is that going to help that? Or again, is it just going to saturate the F1 grid or oversaturate the grid?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I would say, and I'm not trying to run down the middle of the fence on you here, I think there's probably two ways to look at this. There were a lot of people back in early 2000s saying, oh, you got to take America to F1. And I kept saying, no, you got to bring F1 to America. I kept saying, no, you got to take, America to F1. Doesn't work that way. And they said, no, what Formula One really needs to succeed in America is an American driver. Okay. I didn't believe that, but that's okay if that's what you believe. So we got Scott Speed. Did that impact on the radar Formula One in America at all? Not a blip. And they said, well, it's not just because Scott, he wasn't a champion. Well, okay. Most drivers aren't Formula One champions. The majority of Formula One drivers ever who have participated aren't champions. Okay. So That's easy to say, but they said, well, okay, but what they really need is an American team, like Dan Gurney's American Eagles. Okay, well, we got Haas. Did that radically grow America's viewership of Formula One when we got Gene Haas in the sport? No. So if you ask me if I think Andretti Autosport or Andretti Global is going to be a huge impact to American interest in Formula One, I have historic precedents to suggest that it won't. All right. However, with all deference to Michael Andretti and his father, Mario, those other options, Haas, F1, Scott Speed, Alexander Rossi, we even have Logan Sargent, a driver for Williams. Has that made a big impact? No, he's scrambling to keep his ride, right? None of that's made an impact. I will say that everybody knows the name Andretti. Everybody around the world. Mario is a Formula One champion. And I'm not implying that he's been living off that, but he is a well-known name in Formula One circles, and Michael Andretti drove for McLaren briefly. And and the other thing is, they're not going to be coming in. My hunch is if they come in and tool around as the last place team for 3 or 4 years, then it's a damp squib. It doesn't matter. But Andretti Global, Andretti Autosport, that's a serious racing operation. They know what they're doing over there. It'd be like Penske coming in. Penske knows how to compete at the world stage, and so does Andretti. And I'd argue Chip Ganassi too. So the fact is that if there was a chance of a team impacting American fans and getting them more heavily leveraged in the sport, it would definitely be Andretti or like a Penske. Yeah. So my jury's out on it, Jeff. I wish I had a better answer for that, but I'm very intrigued to see. And just because the FIA has approved their application, FOM has not approved that. All these headlines flying around last week, Andretti approved to join the grid. No, they're not. The FIA approved their application, but FOM has to vet it. That could go either way.
And as you say, I think too, I mean, if they come in and they suck, there's no interest there regardless. And that applies, I think, to any expansion team or expansion sport anywhere. If the Vegas Golden Knights had gone into the NHL and not gone to the Stanley Cup Finals in their first year, they'd still be a team that would only be half filling the arena with local fans, as the Vegas Raiders are experiencing right now. I'm not a big NFL football fan, but I read enough headlines to know that the Raiders are sucking, and half of that stadium is full of tourist fans. So if you had Andretti Motorsports go in and, as you say, maintain a bottom of the pack season for the first 2 or 3 years, it's going to be a completely moot point of them being there, regardless of what their sponsorship is or who makes their engines or who's running that team or driving.
It's so true. And, I don't mean this to be nationalistic, but, there's just a difference between the American sports fan and the British sports fan, or the French sports fan, or the German, pick a nation, doesn't matter, Brazilian race fan. They're just different in their fan and how they consume the sport, what they're willing to do to invest in the sport, how much emotional capital they're willing to invest in the sport. The American fan is just different. I'm not saying it's better, worse, or anything. My gosh, look at the British Grand Prix. Nobody does the British or Formula One like the British fans, or Japanese or anyone else. So I think it's just a different fan base that has a different consumer relationship with the sport that they choose to invest emotional capital in, and how to appeal to that, for better or worse, in America tends to be, we like to see a winner, and if Andretti's not, if they're going to run to the back of the grid, I'm done. I don't care,
Yeah. There are people who would be, there are people who are Kevin Magnussen fans and Nico Hulkenberg fans, and there are drivers, Esteban Ocon, and I'm thinking of all the guys running at the bottom of the grid there. Those guys, their fans are loyal fans, but it feels like, as you say, the American fan or even the Canadian fan, when it comes to something that they are maybe casually interested in, like Formula One, they want to be invested in the winner. That being said, when you look at Canadian hockey fans, for example, the Toronto Maple Leafs, this is a team that has been terrible for year after year after year after year, and just continues to break the hearts of their fans, but is one of the most highly valued sports franchises in the world. So there are those loyal fans, but as you say, they want a winner.
They do. And I think a good example of that would be, I remember, so with all the best will in the world, America hasn't always been the biggest football fan. I mean, not American football. I'm talking about soccer, British football, the rest of the world, football, right? Yeah. And we were late to the dance on that. Now there's diehards out there. No, I've been watching since '58, and I get it, dude. It was you and about 2 other dudes, right? But the reality of it is that sport has grown. And I remember in the late '90s. Well, it was the Beckham effect, right? I remember in the late '90s, early 2000s, here in St. Louis, Missouri, you go around, you couldn't shake a stick without hitting a Manchester United fan. Why was it? Everybody in America I knew was a Manchester United fan, right? And why? Because they were getting attached to the sport. They were falling in love with the beautiful game, right? And the winner was Manchester United. And that's who they liked. And that, it's just kind of indicative of when you're going to attach yourself to a sport, you're gravitating. I was born and raised in Kansas City, so I have been a long-suffering Kansas City Chiefs fan my entire life. Even living in St. Louis with the Rams, I couldn't care less about the Rams. It was Chiefs. And they were miserable for decades, right? And now that they've won 3 Super Bowls, it's amazing to go around and find all of these NFL fans, young NFL fans, and they love the Chiefs. It's because they're winning.
Let's talk Vegas.
Hey, should we talk about
Vegas, baby, Vegas?
Yes, let's talk about Vegas.
We are about a month to lights out in Las Vegas. Is the F1 community getting excited about Las Vegas? Are you getting excited about this race at all?
You put me on the spot, man. The F1 community is excited about Vegas. The F1 pundits and inside the paddock, the drivers, the teams, very excited about Vegas. Liberty Media, really excited about Vegas. Am I excited about Vegas? My jury's out. I don't tend to, and this is just a me thing. I think traditionally, most F1 fans are really excited about it. Hardcore F1 fans probably cautiously optimistic because they're looking at the track layout and it's not that exciting on a map. It could turn out to be a fantastic track. We just don't know, but on a map, it doesn't look that exciting. I tend to not get too excited about new races, new tracks. But then I'm one of those, fuddy-duddy Luddite purists in Formula One. I'm not, there was so much hype about Miami. This is awesome. This is going to be incredible. Second race in America. This is going to be so cool. It's Miami's the Dolphin Stadium. And oh my gosh, this is going to be so over the top and it's going to be incredible. And we're going to have, 30,000 celebrities in the paddock and just open it up where it's a sea of biomass humanity and all that. And they did all that. And the whole time I'm thinking, let's be realistic. This is a race in the parking lot with fake boats, folks. Let's just be realistic of what we're really watching here. All right. It's a race in the parking lot with fake boats and water. And if you're willing to suspend disbelief and get totally excited about that, I'm all for that. Congratulations. I'm happy for you. For me, it's about the racing. It's about the track. It's about the safety of the track. It's, I've seen too many tracks. So I'm not a big fan of those things that to me are more marketing and entertainment than it is racing. For me, Austin is a proper racetrack. That's a real racetrack. And Miami is different. Elkhart Lake, one of my favorite in America. That's a real racetrack. Petite, Red Atlanta. But for me, Vegas is a street course. It's not a real racetrack, a bespoke, purpose-built racetrack like Austin. So it's a street course. So you have Monaco, Singapore, Saudi Arabia. There's other street tracks you can look at as markers to how exciting this race. And so it will be compared to Singapore, Saudi, and those Baku and those other street courses on its efficacy. There's no doubt it will be over the top in its pomp and circumstance. It's Vegas, right? So that it will be. So I think all of the players, the stakeholders from the teams, drivers, and Formula One, they're all in and they're super excited. I think most fans are really excited about Vegas and having 3 races. So they're really excited. My jury's a little out. I don't know. I'll see what I think after the first race.
I know they've tweaked the course a little bit since you and I spoke last. In the initial release, they added a chicane in around the sphere zone in that turn, which, by the way, I have driven the track on F123 on my PlayStation.
Was it fun?
In my basement. I live streamed it. I was terrible at it. That chicane by the sphere catches me out every single time. I know it's coming and I come around the turn and I go, oh shit, there it is. And I inevitably end up in the runoff zone.
Yeah. It's kind of a blind left-hander, isn't it? Around the,
you come around the turn and all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, it's right there. And there it is. So they have tweaked the track a little bit. I think it is going to be an interesting race to watch. I think it's going to be fun. And as you say, it's going to be fun for not the right reasons necessarily. It is building itself up to be this massive influencers paradise, even more so than Miami was. And I mean, as you say, that first year of Miami and even the second year of Miami was built up. We're going to have all these celebrities and we're going to have all these famous people. And I mean, this year they did that ridiculous driver entrance thing at Miami, which I mean, I didn't watch it on the day of. I watched it afterwards when the videos started showing up on YouTube, and they had will.i.am from the Black Eyed Peas and some symphony orchestra singing and doing a rap and guys coming out. And you could tell even the drivers were walking out going, this is the most ridiculous thing I think I've ever seen and been involved in my entire life. So Vegas, I feel like they're going to be Cirque du Soleil those guys off of the top of the Eiffel Tower or something ridiculous like that. Thoughts on the start time on this race? It's a late start. All of the qualifying and all of the practice for the most part is all being done late at night. And the race is a 10 p.m. Pacific time start. I know there's been some concerns brought up in the F1 media already about the effect that the time, because of the temperature, is going to have on tires and cars. Because I think this is going to be my favorite part of this race, is watching people rolling into Vegas for a race in November at 10 o'clock at night wearing shorts and flip-flops because they think, oh, it's the desert. It's going to be warm. It's not going to be warm, folks. No. So there is going to be some concern, I think, about that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree. I was thinking the same thing. There's going to be all these people showing up in light summer cottons, and it's a desert at night in November. That's going to be cold. And yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think I think for a lot of people, I think they're going into it looking at the starting time. I think the starting time, if you take a global perspective of it, it's great for the rest of the world. It's not really good for America.
No.
And that's the irony in all of this. It's like, we've got 3 races in America and we're going to Vegas, baby. It's awesome. And the people on the East Coast better stay up till 2 and 3 a.m. Well, wait a minute. Time out. I thought this is an American race. Why, well, we're doing it late so the rest of the world can see it. Well, I know, but it's an American race. You don't change the race in Japan or Singapore so I can watch it at noon like I normally watch it over. They've never concerned themselves about the American fan and when we might have to rise to watch a Formula One. It is always centered on GMT in London, and that's the time and target that they're trying to go for. And so to do it at an evening race at 5 o'clock or 4, whatever it was, would have been super late in the UK. So they're going to wait till late. And now our British listeners are going to have to wake up early like American listeners traditionally do. And usually when that happens, I love the British. I'm a huge Anglophile, and they're over there with their coffee, their tea, bitching on social media about having to get up early. It was like, dude, this is our lives over here in America, And so, yeah, it is kind of weird. I'm not a big fan of it. I understand it's a night race, but I wish it would have been a little earlier so the people on the East Coast could watch it.
I know they want the night race because they obviously want the Vegas lights. Great. They want the strip. Yeah. But I mean, again, let's face it, it's November. The sun sets by 7 o'clock in the evening. 7 or 7:30 in the evening that time of the year. They very easily could have done an 8 p.m. race. But as you say, then all of a sudden you've got the people in Europe waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning to watch races, as you and I have to do if we want to watch them live here in North America.
So Americans are like, well, boo-hoo.
Here's the world's tiniest violin for you, playing just for you guys, having to wake up to drink your tea.
I know. I'm so sad you got to get up at 5 a.m. Wham! But that's every weekend for us. No, it is. And you could have even done a race that there's a couple, was it Bahrain or whatever the race is, that's sort of a sunset into night. So it starts when the sun is setting and then it goes into nighttime. And you could have done that too, and got a little bit of the golden hour in Vegas, which is kind of pretty with the sun setting, the desert, and shining off the buildings around Vegas. It's always really pretty, and you're seeing the lights get brighter and brighter, right? And the sphere is a mind-boggling visual. So that might have been fun, but anyway, yeah, it's unfortunate.
A lot of controversy surrounding this race on the political level, on the city level, on the tourist level. Lots of negative reaction from locals and tourists alike. The locals and tourists, there's almost like this Venn diagram of reasons that they're angry that F1 is coming, where the locals have got the construction chaos and the traffic issues and whether or not they're going to be able to get to work and the taxpayer money that's being used. And then the tourists have got the circle where it's like, well, all the room rates are through the roof and you can't access the attractions on the strip, and they cut down all the trees at the Bellagio, and they've closed off the Mirage Volcano and all these kinds of things. And then there's this middle part where it's like nobody can get anywhere in the city. Does all this negativity about the event, does it surprise you?
No. I have a very dear friend who lives in Vegas, has forever. He knows Clark County really well, and he is a super good guy. His name is Jack, and he's a dear friend of mine, and I love Jack. And so I reached out to him to periodically, and I reached out today just to get an update and insight for Boots on Ground and what the locals are thinking. And Jack is always he's one of the most sensible, level-headed guys, I know. And so I knew he'd have a measured view of it. And his point is, look, yeah, the construction's a pain in the butt. It's hard to get around, and, you got to take alternate routes. And he said, people are upset about taking the palm trees. He said, look, the palm trees is part of a grass family. The bigger they get, the more expensive they are, and they add no shade, And so he's like, the people of California may be upset about it, but, we can put them back or whatever. He was like, it's, he says, in his opinion, the benefits, if you want to be big, you got to think big, is what he said. And Vegas, if they want to be big, they need to think big, and this is part of it. And he thinks that in the end, what the impact is to the city, all of this will sort of fall to the side. I think I remember reading, Jeff, and you probably know better than I would, but I think Formula One or the city had estimated the financial impact of the city of around $1.2 billion, I think, into the economy, local economy. I'm sure that Clark County would be very pleased with that, and all the hotels and casinos. So that's one side of it. The other thing I will tell you is that this is the first year they're trying to configure a street circuit in a city that's never had one. So you're trying to quasi build repeatable infrastructure that can be built up and tore down. Monaco, by example, that's a well-oiled machine. They can set that town up for that race in no time. Even like Saudi and Singapore is a well-oiled machine now. So those things will in time become less invasive on the locals. Because they'll get faster at it. They'll learn their lessons. They may move some grandstands. There may be areas in this first year that didn't really work the way they wanted to, so they won't do that there. They may move things. So this is a first-year heartburn thing, and I think it's creating a lot of havoc because everyone's kind of trying to figure it out. But once you get a cadence going forward, this will be smoother and smoother and smoother in time. They'll have a better idea of how long it actually does take them to erect grandstands at this place, And so anyway, I think it'll get better in time.
And I think you're right. I think that's kind of been the big concern that I've even read on a lot of the different Vegas Facebook pages and social media that I see is all of the people that are saying, we're going to go through this shit every single year. And I mean, they're looking at it going, and I've tried to sort of say, and I mean, social media, you can't argue with people on the internet. It's pointless. But you try to sort of say to these people, well, okay, this year they had to tear down the streets. They had to dig down the actual streets, the 36 inches or whatever it was, to then build up the base layer that they needed for the actual track surface, and then lay the new track surface and go through all of that. And that was a huge project. They started that in March.
Yeah.
I mean, as I was telling you before we started here today, I was in Vegas back in May, and I got caught up in F1 traffic, and it was a nightmare to get around anywhere. So I think a lot of people are looking at this and going, oh, go through all this garbage every year. And in the months, it's, 6 months of BS for 3 days of racing and blah, 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 blah. And again, I think people are really kind of concerned that, yeah, this is going to be every year. And as I say, and as you've said, it's not. The other cities that do this run it like a well-oiled machine.
They do. And I think you get better and you learn a lot that first year. And, even Austin, which is a purpose-built racetrack, they had to learn a lot that first year on traffic management and busing people in and parking and fields and mud and all of the stuff that, they took a lot of incoming fire on that first year and a lot of lessons learned. So I think Vegas will learn a lot of lessons, a lot of smart people out there. They'll figure it out. Even building up the grandstands and the anchoring points that you need in the concrete to build these grandstands, those will be there next year. So we're not having to drill those out and pour concrete and all that crap. Those will be there. The track will have been laid. If there's any touch-ups or resurfacing, they can do that. But it's not like every year they're ripping up 36 inches of the strip. And so I think that all of that is just economies of scale. And as time goes on, I think it'll be easier. It won't be absolutely disruption-free, but it won't be as egregious, I think, as this first year.
We talked about the consumerism level of it earlier here, and the ticket prices, and I mean, I've had ticket price offers and package offers emailed to me. I don't know who they think I am, because some of the packages that have been sent to me is, here's a $15,000 per person package
VIP.
to watch it from Club SI, overlooking the track with Shaquille O'Neal and David Beckham hosting your event. And I'm looking going, I gambled like $600 with Caesars last year. Who am I? Why am I getting this? Do these ticket prices, Vegas being Vegas and Formula One being Formula One, did any of this surprise you? I mean, we talked about this a year and a half ago, and I think we both said, yeah, they're going to be stupid expensive.
Yeah.
Any shock at all here? Other than sticker shock?
Yeah, true. Yeah, I'm kind of two thoughts here. I do think the prices are too high for sure. I think even if you were trying to sneak into town with a 3-day general admission ticket, you wouldn't get out of that city in anything under $1,000, per person. And that doesn't count travel. So that's general admission. And then it gets up to $11,000, $15,000, $20,000, right? It gets stupid money. Grandstands for $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. Sort of VIP sort of areas where you can go to a club or whatever and watch it from there for $11,000. I mean, that's just, I don't know, that's just stupid money to me. So on one side, I think this is Liberty Media. This is a race that is not sanctioned. This is sanctioned by Liberty Media. It's one of the very few races that the actual Formula One owners are hosting and sanctioning, right? So they don't have to pay themselves the $25 million sanctioning fee because they're doing it all. But on one hand, you're bringing a race to America. It's America. You said you're going to come to America. We're going to embrace America. It's all about America. Bring in Formula One, and this would be great. And then you have, $3,000 ticket prices. What are you doing? Why wouldn't you have made the ticket prices affordable so all the Americans could come, as many as you could get, to really, get America excited and that kind of thing? Why all of a sudden did it become a VIP event for only the people that are well-heeled that can afford to go, right? That's one side of the coin. The other side of that coin is it can't be cheap to shut down the Strip in Las Vegas, right? And I'll guarantee you Liberty Media is paying a pretty penny for the privilege.
Yeah.
I'm sure every single one of those casinos were, upset and ripping robes and gnashing teeth about shutting down the Strip for this amount of time because that impacts their traffic, right? So Formula One would counter and say, yeah, but we're going to bring, thousands and thousands of people in. Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. So I think it's cost a lot of money to do what Liberty Media is doing in Vegas. And so that has to be recouped somewhere, and it's probably in the fashion or in the form of a ticket price. So I kind of see both sides of that coin. But in answer to your query, no, I didn't buy tickets and I'm not going.
I mean, F1 and Liberty Media did pull the we're going to charge all of the venues along the Strip a fee.
Oh, the privilege.
The privilege fee at one point where it was I think it was $1,500 per person up to the maximum capacity. And they figured out like a venue that held 1,000 people, it was going to be a $1.5 million cost that these places were going to have to pay. And if they didn't pay it, Formula One said, oh, we're going to put up fences and we're going to build a grandstand right in front of your venue.
Did that go through?
So that apparently my understanding was F1 backed off a little bit.
Yeah, they should.
And said, okay, we're just going to charge you a flat rate fee of whatever it was. I can't remember. But they did back off after there was such a huge uproar about this from these different restaurants. Some of the restaurants that said there was one restaurant, the Parc MGM, that said they were going to have to, they were charging this fee for their restaurant on race weekend as a viewing fee, blah, blah, blah. And somebody rightly pointed out and said, you are located in the basement. You don't even have televisions in your facility. And you want to charge a minimum of $150 per person to be in the restaurant on race weekend. Like, so I think there's greed on every side of this. And I know the hotels are now starting to get a little bit burned on the room rates. I'm seeing the room rates dropping pretty significantly. You can get into the Flamingo on race weekend in one of their basic fab rooms, as they call it, for $150 a night. Whereas at the beginning, those rooms were $500 or $600 a night. Now, that being said, that's not going to guarantee you're going to get a room that faces out onto Vegas Boulevard or whatever. And also with the accessibility to the Strip, that's not even a guarantee you're going to get to your damned hotel, quite frankly, based on how accessible things are.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know better than I would on this. Comparing ticket prices in other places compared to Las Vegas, what can you ballpark it as far as an estimate in price difference or percentage difference? I mean, it's a significant amount, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's quite a bit more. I was trying to think, and I should have looked before I jumped on the call just to compare. I think Monaco's pretty pricey. Singapore, I think, is pretty pricey. The high profile races are pretty pricey. Austin's less expensive. Miami's pretty pricey. But I think, I could be off on this. I think Vegas was kind of one of the more expensive ones I've seen. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, these revenue streams. Liberty Media is going to look at this and have meaningful conversations, like you said, with the hotels. The hotels will be complaining that they're tearing up the Strip and cutting down foot traffic. On the flip side, from one saying that's premium real estate for our show, and you got to pay up, suckers. So this is going to be trying to squeeze millions out of the Vegas, the actual businesses up and down the Strip and around because of their strategic location, which I'm sure they didn't choose. And so, or maybe some did, to be there. But yeah, I think it is super expensive. And I also think, it's always about following the money. And if there's a way people can, of the $1.2 billion, every single business, restaurant, sidewalk hustler is trying to figure out how much of that $1.2 billion can I get,
Yeah. Well, and Formula One's going to have a presence in Las Vegas year round too. They've built the paddock. They've built that purpose-built facility just off the Strip that they've said is going to be a year-round F1 attraction. I'd like to see them do something like they've done in London with that F1 arcade.
Yeah.
That place is on my bucket list of places to go. So if they could do something like that in Vegas, which it would make perfect sense if they did, they're going to have that year-round presence in the in the city, which hopefully maybe will give a little bit of goodwill towards the people in Las Vegas. I know they failed miserably with their attempt at offering tickets to locals here this last week.
What was that, like $200 for a single day ticket? But was that just for practice?
It was for the Thursday practice session. That was it. The other ticket prices were up into the $1,300 and $1,400 mark. And people looked and went, you're killing us here. Like I have friends that work in Las Vegas as performers who are not working that weekend, race weekend, because they can't physically get to where they're working on that weekend. They've been given the weekend off, which means they're not getting paid for that weekend of what would normally be a weekend of work. So it's kind of like F1 saying, listen, we know you can't get paid, but hey, do you want to buy a ticket for a 1-day practice event that's going to cost you this? And they failed somewhat miserably.
You could go watch 2 hours of practice on a Thursday for $200. That's $100 an hour.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, and I even feel too, like Formula One, they're definitely taking advantage of the Vegas thing. I looked at they do the own the checkered flag for all the races, where you can get your name and a message on the checkered flag that's waved at the race. And I've often thought, like, I've looked at it and thought, you know what, that would be a cool thing to do, right? And the previous races, I looked at Montreal Canadian Grand Prix, I thought that would be fun. It was like $450 to get, and I thought that'd be really cool. Vegas was like $1,800 to get a square on the checkered flag, and I looked and went, no, I'll do it maybe next year if it goes down in price, maybe next year.
Isn't that crazy?
So overall, in your opinion, this is going to be good for Vegas? Is it going to be good for F1?
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah. I think so, Jeff. I think it'll be good for Vegas in the long run. They got to deliver on the head count. And as long as Formula One feels comfortable, they're going to be able to deliver 100,000, 200,000 or more over a race weekend. That's good. If you could bring 150,000, 200,000 people or more to Vegas over a 3-day period, that's great for Vegas. It's a lot of discretionary income that's going to be spent gambling, alcohol, parties, events. It'll be good for Vegas in the long run, I think. The biggest concern I have is actually the track. If the race is not good, the pomp and circumstance will wear off. Because if the race and the track and everything is basically a yawner, it just is going to lose its steam. I also don't think that those prices are sustainable in the long run. When I go back and think about Austin, when Austin came on board, I could buy a general admission ticket for the weekend for $99. And the best place to set at Austin is anywhere between turns 6 through 11, those S's, because that's where you really see a Formula One car do what it is designed to do. And so I could sit on the grassy hill out there and watch that for $99. Then when DTS came out, Austin, Bobby, bless his heart over there, I do the same, Bobby. He increased prices and took advantage of the excitement about Formula One, as you do. But he actually increased it to take advantage of it. I'm not sure how sustainable Vegas or Miami will be in the long run as things start to balance out. And it'll be interesting to see, but it'll be good for Vegas for, the initial few races.
I would love to know in the end how many of those $5 million win packages, or I think the $5 million was the Caesars package. Because that was the one where you stayed at the Nobu and you had the chef Nobuashi or whoever come and cook dinner for you, and it was 12 people that got to go to Adele, and you got all the. I would love to know in the end how many of those packages actually sold. If they sold more than one, I'm impressed. If they sold one, I'm impressed.
Right. Well, they were pricey, so I could only get 2 of them, but yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, it's just It'll be interesting to see. I think even Miami, after that first year when they went all in over the top and it was just crazy. And I think the second year they kind of pumped the brakes a little bit on it, kind of pulled it back a little bit, toned it down a little bit. I suspect eventually Las Vegas will find its, happy spot. Ticket prices will probably come down over time. I don't know that it's sustainable where it's at now, but they're going to capitalize on the initial first inaugural race, and they're going to capitalize on that. But I think in the long run, it'll be good for Vegas.
Todd, I appreciate you taking the time, jumping on. Yeah. I love chatting F1, and I love chatting F1 with you. We need to do this more often, actually. I think.
We do. Well, the honor is always mine, Jeff. It's been great to come on, and thanks so much for your kind consideration of me and the Parc Fermé.
If people want to find the Parc Fermé podcast, how do they go about doing that? Of course, you're on every major podcast platform, and you're online, social media, the whole shebang.
We are. You can go to our website, the Parc Fermé, PARCFERME, just like Parc Fermé in Formula One. So it's theparcferme.com is the website. Apple Music or Apple Podcasts, just type in the Parc Fermé podcast. You'll find us. Spreaker, Spotify, Google, and then you can go to YouTube. We record video of every podcast, and you go to our YouTube channel, The Parc Fermé, and you can watch us there as well. So yeah, we're everywhere.
Excellent, Todd. Thank you
again.
You
bet. Thanks so much.
And that wraps up another episode of Jeff Does Vegas. If you've got feedback on this episode of the show, or any other episode for that matter, or you've got suggestions and ideas for topics you'd like me to cover on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to me via Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Jeff Does Vegas. Or drop me an email directly at jeff@jeffdoesvegas.com. In the meantime, thank you so much for checking out the show. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts so you'll know the moment new episodes are available. And don't forget to visit jeffdoesvegas.com for past episodes and show notes. My name is Jeff, and this has been Jeff Does Vegas, a Walker New Media production.